afternoon, everyone. Very warm GEM welcome to this special session about working with schools now and in the future. I'm Rachel Tranter, Director of GEM, and we have a slot in the exhibitors stand near the entrance, so do come and have further chats after the talk. So, just to say, warm welcome. Thank you everyone for joining. It's great to see so many people in person here and for us to be at the show again after so much online interaction. As I'm sure you're all aware, learning has been through enormous disruption and change over the last 2 years. Change and disruption that's been very much felt by the museum learning sector as well as the school sector. And there's been a lot of concerns around safety, obviously in learning roles, but also lots of opportunities in terms of digital and working in new ways. Schools now occupy both physical and virtual spaces, and museum and heritage organisations need to do the same, creating new types of relationships with schools that are based on equity and sustainable partnerships, embrace technology and go beyond the regular school visit. And GEM's changed a lot too in the last few years that you probably have noticed. This is just a quick snapshot of some of our current offers. So we're going to Derby. If anyone wants to come and join us, they'll be very, very welcome. So conference taking place at the Museum of Making. And we are accepting calls for papers at the moment. So if you'd like to contribute to conference, it's a very collegiate space for member presentations and also workshops, then please do fill in the form. Just a little snapshot of some of the workshops that we've coming up soon. You can find about these on our website. We've branched out into doing some physical events as well as carrying on with online events. So we'll be going to Brodsworth Hall, for example, on the 20th of May. It's very excited about that one, to look at their Liberty and Lottery exhibition. And we also have a regular freelance events and fantastic area events as well throughout the country and the UK. The one-to-one mentoring programme, if you haven't already had a GEM mentor, it's definitely worth looking into this. Really amazing relationships that you can form with your mentor over 2 or 3 sessions. And we've got a next round coming up that will be launched in July for mentoring relationships between August and November. And just a last slide really from GEM that we have some spaces, last spaces on our Heritage Interpretation training course with Sarah Oswald. But we do run other training courses throughout the year, so watch this space for other things that are coming up soon. And just some contact details from GEM. So I'm now going to hand over, really delighted that I've been joined by Kate Fellows and Emily Nelson from Leeds Museums and Galleries, Fran Jeens from the Jewish Museum, and Sam Fieldhouse from Wessex Archaeology. So thank you to all of you, and they're going to now talk to you about our topic, working with schools now and in the future. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Rachel. Hi, everyone. You all right? See, I have to lower the microphone, and everybody's been teasing me about that for the last 10 minutes, because I'm very small. So, hi, I'm Kate Fellows. I'm the Head of Learning and Access for Leeds Museums and Galleries. About 4 years ago now, 4 years ago now, we launched something called the Leeds Curriculum. You should have flyers around the auditorium. It's on mylearning.org, and we've got a stand. It's on D8. So if you want lots of nitty-gritty details about how we did this, then come and talk to us there. But basically, the Leeds Curriculum is a curriculum for primary schools about a place, for a place, and by that place. Place-based learning is a thing, folks, and it's becoming an even bigger thing. No matter what it's called, in Europe it's called 15-minute neighbourhoods. Over here it's called place-based or area-based curriculums. But basically, using those, you can fix the problems of an area through their educational attainment. So you can rise attainment and you can rise attendance, okay? For the Leeds curriculum, we took a cross-art form approach. So it's not just us in museums. It's got dance, it's got drama, it's got all sorts of things. And it means that the schools in our area can use the things on the curriculum to fix the issues that they've got in their schools. At least that's the theory. Okay, folks? Are you with me so far? Yeah? At the same time as we launched the Leeds curriculum in 2018, we launched a school membership scheme, which is awesome, frankly. We've got loans boxes, we've got workshops, we've got teacher CPD, and we do curriculum planning. Hold the curriculum planning thought. Emily's going to come back to that in a moment. Oh, you're right behind me. So, in terms of the loans boxes, we only use accessioned museum objects in our loans boxes that go out to schools. As a service, we made a decision a number of years ago that we only use accessioned objects. We don't have a handling collection, we don't use replicas, and we don't use models, unless we're teaching the term replica. So that's when we occasionally do use them. Alongside the loans boxes, we offer lots of different workshops, and we offer teacher CPD. That's essentially how we get around sending accessioned museum objects out. We train the whole staff team in best practice object learning, and we also train them in what happens when things break and how you deal with it as adults. So that's how we get around the robust kind of risk assessment processes we have with our curators. Okay? So that's two of the ways we've started to engage with schools for the future. The main purpose underneath both of these things, the Leeds curriculum and matched with membership, is building long-term relationships with schools. What we decided when we set them up is that we wanted to be able to, what's the best way to say this? A mentor once told me that I should be able to walk into a staff room of a school and to not look out of place, and for them to go, "Oh, right, hi, it's you, can I talk to you about something?" So that was the underpinning of what we did when we did the Leeds curriculum and membership. Obviously, I don't just wander into any school and go, "Can I sit in your staff room and have a cup of tea?" But that idea of that being a normal thing, that you would have arts and cultural practitioners coming in and out of school and helping with your planning and helping, and you could ask mutually beneficial questions and stuff of each other, was how we started both of those things. However, the most popular thing that's been the reason most schools are joining the membership scheme is about the curriculum planning side. So I'm going to hand over to Emily, who's going to talk to you more in depth about that.
Now I've moved the microphone up. Yeah, so I'm Emily, I'm the Learning and Access Officer at the Leeds Discovery Centre, and I run the membership scheme. And I've never heard Kate say that before, but I'm really pleased to be able to say that within the schools that we work with in our membership scheme, I can and do wander into those schools, and teachers do stop me and say, "Can I just ask you about Romans?" or "Can I just talk to you about my Egyptians topic that I'm doing at the moment?" It is possible to build those relationships with our schools. It's not possible to build it with all of our schools at once in a second, but that's where this curriculum planning stuff comes in. So a very brief note on how we got that here, but Kate obviously has covered some of that, is the new Ofsted framework changed in 2020. Prior to that, of course, the new curriculum came in. There was a flurry, we all recognised it, of schools going, "Oh my God, what do I do about the Stone Age?" But actually, most of our schools in Leeds then settled back down into a very similar rhythm to what they had been doing before. It's with the new curriculum that massive changes are happening. And lots of schools are really worried about this. I had a head teacher of a multi-academy trust say to me recently, for 25 years that I've been in education, all that Ofsted have cared about is reading, writing, maths and phonics. We are really good at reading, writing, maths and phonics. Now that they want us to have a coherent sequenced history curriculum or science or geography curriculum that ties together, that we understand a progression of knowledge and concepts through, I have no idea what we are doing. This is a head teacher. The sector is missing, in many cases, in many of our schools, some of these subject specialist skills and knowledge that, guess what, we have. We hold that in our museums, along with our knowledge of our place. You know, at Leeds, we know Leeds. We are the people who hold the story and the history and the love of our city. And so that's where this curriculum planning has become really, really important to schools in Leeds. And they've started to realise they can come and talk to us about it. And once one of the head teachers sent it out to a cluster, we had schools banging the door down, not just for the membership, but for specifically work around their curriculums. So how do we do this? To start with, it is not my job to write a school's curriculum for them and then say, this is what you need to do, off you go. But we are already very good facilitators. In museum learning, that is something we are really strong at doing. And so much of this work that I'm doing is about facilitating the school to make thoughtful and intentional decisions themselves about what they are going to teach and why. And I always say it's about, if someone, Ofsted, but also anyone says, why have you chosen to do this? They can say, we have chosen to specifically look at the Civil War. This is one of the schools I work with in Otley, because before the Battle of Marston Moor, the Loyalist forces garrisoned in Otley and then walked off to York. So actually, when you're choosing what you're putting in your curriculum, if someone asks them why, that's because that happened in the town. There's no reason that another school needs to do the Civil War, but every school has the opportunity to make decisions about what they are teaching, and we have the knowledge and the ability to help them to think through those decisions. That school didn't know anything about the Battle of Marston Moor before I started working with them. It didn't take me very long to find out. I'm not an expert in the history of Otley, but we already have our collections and we already have that local knowledge. So it's all about the three Ofsted I's: intent, implementation and impact. But I actually would say that's, again, what we do in museums. We are intentional about what we teach and how we teach it and why we teach it. All the conversations around decolonisation that are happening across the sector at the moment are happening in museum learning. Schools are saying, we want to do this, but we don't know how. Well, actually, with us being able to support them, even just by talking about the conversations we're having in our sector, I now have, schools in Leeds that are teaching the Egyptians, but they're specifically talking about things like how it wasn't Howard Carter who found Tutankhamun's tomb, it was the water boy, but no one recorded his name. A year 3 told me that. This is high-level history skills from a really early age. I have a school in Beeston who we worked with on their questions that drive their topic. They ask a question of their year 6ers, what was the impact of the Industrial Revolution on Beeston? And that is a GCSE level question, essentially. But they are year 6ers who are doing a really good job of answering that, and they are going to school ready to do a good job of history. And it's not just history we work across. I'm aware that I can't talk for much longer, but I did bring some curriculum documents just to share with you a little bit about what this looks like. So this is an example of a long-term plan that I put together with a local school. And actually, through the relationship that this school has built with us as a museum service, I'm now a governor at this school. With a curriculum responsibility, they got away with that, didn't they? So this is the top level. So we're looking at history, we're looking at geography, we're looking at science. We're covering statutory content, we're tying it in with the local area. This is backed up by this school not only paying for my time in working with them on this, but also buying into the gold level of our membership, which is £2,100 a year. And every teacher in this school at this point pretty much goes, can you help me with this? Or can you just come and we'll use an hour of that CPD just to sit and do some planning? And that means that what started as a top-level impact, this is the kind of headlines of what you should teach, has come through right the way to what order the lessons are happening in the classroom, what resources are being used, what resources are on My Learning, how we can use the Leeds curriculum in our planning and in our classroom practice, and how they can then come back out to trips to all of our museums to underpin this work that we're doing. So this is a really big holistic thing, and it works, and it's the sort of thing that, as a local authority, particularly as a local authority museum, I feel like we have a responsibility to do this. We've lost a lot of learning improvement specialists in the city recently, but actually, within all of our cities, there are many organisations like us with specialisms who can come together and do this sort of work with schools. And I am aware that this is the last slide, and I'm going to have to swap. And I would be really, really happy to take any questions that anyone has later. Obviously, this is a real whirlwind, but go for it, guys, because we really can do this, and we really can have this sort of impact all the way through schools, which is all of our visions, I think. So we'll be on the My Learning stand, and it is my absolute pleasure to hand over to Fran, who's going to talk about blended learning.
Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. I'm just going to set my timer. So I'm just going to move that forward. Lovely. So hi, everybody. My name is Fran. Hope everyone can hear me right at the back. Some nods. Thank you. So I had a bit of a think when we talked about this, when we first raised this topic about working with schools now and in the future. Great talk there about curriculum development, and we've got some exciting technology from the next talk as well. I have gone with something slightly different. I could have talked about our GCSE program and the workshops we do, which is extremely popular with secondary schools, or some of the technology and the VR stuff we're doing. But I thought instead, when I think about the future of the learning at the Jewish Museum, we're thinking a lot more about the work we'll be doing with emotional evaluation and topics which are extremely complex. So I'm going to touch on a little bit of sort of case study data, which I think is always nice to share, and then we'll do a little bit of a deep dive as well. So just to give you a little bit of context, the Jewish Museum is a smallish team. We're about 15 members of staff. We have a very, very collaborative approach to our work. So, for example, it's not just the learning team who deliver tours, that's across all departments. So if you're front of house, operations, marketing, collections, any one of those roles, you will also be on the tour schedule, the duty manager schedule, and it makes us very aware of each other's work. But the learning team itself is 5 members of staff. And they cover everything you guys are covering, so schools, families, communities, and everything between that. And maybe some of you saw the talks we gave about virtual classrooms and the work we did over lockdown. They obviously led a huge amount of that work. So just to give you a bit of an idea of the learning offer evolution by numbers, I just thought some hard facts are always much appreciated. So I'm just going to share with you, we've got the first column, which is before lockdown, then we've got during lockdown, and then I haven't called it post-COVID because I don't think we're quite there yet, but the idea of moving past COVID anyway. So before COVID, we had about 20,000 students into the museum. Over lockdown, obviously nobody was in the museum. And then we started welcoming schools back really in September, so about a 6 months-ish program to date. And we've seen about 6,500 back to site so far. That number is only increasing, so hopefully by the time we have full year data, we'll have a much better idea of that return rate. Outreach, we did none before COVID. During lockdown, we piloted going to schools. We've done a few since we've reopened, but it's not for us for a bunch of logistical reasons that I'm really happy to talk through if people have questions, but we've decided to put our resources elsewhere. Before COVID, for digital, we had the learning portal, which was entirely resources you could download. There was no sort of facilitated aspects, and there were mainly pre- and post-visit resources rather than independent study. Because the topics we talk about at the museum, we very much favour facilitated learning rather than independent study, and that's one of the values that we have, which, if you came to the virtual classrooms talk, you'll have heard me talk a lot about. That value was time with our expert staff. So obviously during lockdown, virtual classrooms was it, and we reached sort of over 18,000, almost 19,000 students through that program, and that was a paid program. It's exactly the same cost as our visits to site. So it was a huge, huge deal for us. And then that has continued, not at the same level as schools have returned. Some have dropped off virtual classrooms, but it is still there as an offer, either solely as that or as a blended offer as well. And then we also had the loan boxes, which had only just launched pre-COVID. I think we were a month or so ahead of that. And then obviously nothing went out during the lockdowns. But then as we started gearing out of that, slowly, when we couldn't go to school or they couldn't come to us, loan boxes were that lovely moment of like hybrid activity. And that's carried on. So those are continuing to go out, but at a lower rate than we are putting energy into virtual classrooms. And again, that's the facilitated nature of what we do. So you'll see at the bottom the totals. So where we've landed is we've managed to keep steady our total number of students across those 3 years, but they're coming in very different ways. We've tried doing projections. I'm sure, like many of you, you've been filling in funding applications, remain nameless, and having to project all of your visits and what you're expecting to be over the next 3 years. We're going to just keep steady with that, but I can't say they're definitely going to be virtual classrooms or they're going to be on site, but we have a bit of an idea for where we're going, I think. So the other thing I'm going to share is I'm like many learning people, also a school governor of a local school in East London, out in Barking, where I live. And this is some data that was shared with the other governors, which was about the reading and writing levels of the school kids, like within our borough. So it's very borough specific, but I expect very transferable. And this is something that we have been very aware of when we think about our school programme of the future. So on here, I think slides will probably be available afterwards in case you can't write it all down, but it's just showing the reality of what has been a very, very tough time for kids and for parents, and where we can understand comprehension levels are going to be. And, you know, I hate this sort of terminology of catching up, but they are where they are because of where we all are. But the reality is that how we would potentially write things or explain things to year threes 2-3 years ago, we just have to be very aware of our delivery and the language that we're using. And like many of you, you probably didn't have autonomy in deciding what language was going on your object labels, on your interpretation boards. So the comprehension level is often quite high for children, and then we have to accept that their reading levels are maybe not where we would have thought they would be a few years ago. So just being very, very aware of that. So as we're starting to build learning workshops, programs, workshops, like worksheets and things for them to do in, I just think when we think about the next few years, we have to be really mindful of how we're using language when we're talking to children, especially if, like us, you're using technical language. You know, we use things that are very specific to the topics we teach, like Jewish objects have certain names. So we just have to be super aware of that. So I just want to show you a new sort of a case study, just to show you maybe what the future of learning looks like for us. We obviously do what you'd expect us to be doing. We do a lot of RE and PHSE, talking about tolerance, anti-Semitism, racism, Jewish studies, Holocaust education. But post-COVID, there was another gap that was obvious that was coming through, which was children had been through a really, really tough time. Many of them had experienced loss and death and grief for the very, very first time. They may have lost grandparents, some had lost teachers, some had lost parents. So this was a topic that was everywhere. And even if you hadn't lost someone, all of us were watching the daily briefings with death rate numbers on front pages, on television screens, and kids just pick that sort of stuff up. So we were aware this topic conversation was happening, and actually at the museum, that is a topic that we come across a lot for obvious reasons. And so the learning team came together. All of the learning team are also trained mental health first aiders, and we said, what could we do with our collection that is potentially going to be very meaningful to children over the next few years? So what we developed was what we've called Life with Loss. It's technically it's a Holocaust education workshop, so it's based on a Holocaust survivor's testimony, but the program is not about learning about the Holocaust. The program is about learning how to talk about death and grief and loss. So what we did was put in place something, we do a form of evaluation called emotional evaluation, where children tell us across the workshop the emotion they're feeling at different times, which builds us an emotional map of their experience. So we've been doing that for a number of years. Again, really happy to talk about that if people would like. But we have built on that to think about how do we program these sorts of topics of conversation. So that is an example of one of the emotional evaluation questions we asked and some of the comments that the kids had afterwards. What we can clearly see is that, you know, kids have, you know, a range of emotions before they even start their workshops with us. And then talking about a topic like this brings up different emotions as we go through. We partnered with an amazing charity called Grief Encounter, who are experts in talking to children about these topics. And I would, you know, as I'm sure you're all very practiced in, you know, when we come to doing topics that are potentially a little bit, you know, out of our usual field of expertise, finding those partners has been really key for us. So this is another example just from the workshop. At this point, I think we're about midway through the workshop. They've seen one of the films and they've done some of the activities with the facilitators. And again, just trying to get that emotional feedback from them, like where are we, what are we talking about, what language have we been using? And then this is the creative art piece work that they do at the end, where they use some of Solly, who's the survivors, who's the whole workshop is based upon. We use his images and his documents, and they overlay those with transparent paper and put their own emotions and their own feelings about what they've experienced on top of that to create like a two-piece artistic. Oh, is that me? So that's just a bit of an example there that you can see the kids sort of working through and processing those emotions. So I'm in 9 minutes. I've got a full minute for my last slide. So the future of JML blended learning. I've just put some of our initial thoughts on here. We're really focusing energy on encouraging back to site. For us, facilitated learning is the heart of what we do. It's not replicable by independent learning, and therefore we need to encourage back to site. But we will continue virtual classrooms because they allow that type of facilitation that's important to us. And whilst we will encourage the loan box and the travelling exhibitions, they will be hopefully an extension of their learning they're doing with us already, rather than just solely independent. But we won't be focusing much on outreach. For us, it's too resource heavy. It doesn't necessarily reach the schools that we want to be reaching. And for practical reasons, it doesn't work very well for us. The other thing that I think is something we've reflected on as we think about the future is the targets from funders are already back to pre-COVID levels. So I was in a meeting with another funder, who will remain nameless, who sent us the targets, and they were higher than pre-COVID targets. So just thinking about the future that we have to be in, really making sure that we're being articulate with our funders, with our trustees, and with ourselves about what is growth and what is success, and what's important when we're doing our learning programs. And of course, our funders nearly always prefer visits on site. It's much more visible. They get all of that sort of soft feedback, which is, is much easier for us to demonstrate. So just thinking about long-term, what we're putting our resource into, it's important for a number of reasons. And I think the last thing for us is that we've given all of our schools a choice over the last 2 years about what learning environment works for them. So they can come to the museum, they can be virtual, they can have outreach, or they can take the loan boxes. We're not going to take that choice away. That choice is still there for them. We might help direct what we think is best for what workshops, but I think that empowerment of them choosing the learning environment for themselves has taught us a lot about what we can tell schools they need and what they can tell us they need at different points. I'll stop there. I think I'm almost bang on time. I'll also be around if anyone has any questions about any of the things I've sort of touched on as we've gone. But thank you very much.
Now going to hand over to Sam. Thanks very much, from Wessex Archaeology.
Hello, good afternoon everyone. I'm Sam, I'm Learning Community Manager at Wessex Archaeology. Nod at me if you're a GEM member. Good, if you're a GEM member, give me a big huzzah. Oh, that's terrible. If you're not a GEM member, give me a shameful boo. Ooh. Join GEM. It's been the background of my career for 15 years, and through the practice and the skills I've learned through being part of GEM, that's had a massive impact on my own practice, the practice of my team, and the way that we've engaged with thousands of children. So join GEM, change the world. That was the hard sell. Yes, good. VR is everywhere. I mean, look around the show, everyone's demonstrating VR, we're demonstrating VR. It's hugely popular. Most, and I'll come back to that, most children really like it. But just because it's cool, just because it's different, just because it's futuristic, doesn't make it any good. It doesn't make it a useful learning resource. It doesn't make it something that actively conveys heritage learning and conveys all those learning outcomes that we've all worked for years to achieve. Thinking back through my own career and recently working in archaeology, something I'm plagued by is the sand pit. And whenever myself and my colleague Beth, my colleague is over there, whenever we go to events, we're quite often asked to bring a sand pit. And we say to our partners, well, why would we bring a sand pit? And they say, because children love playing in sand. And I say, yes, they do. But how is that educational? And just because it's fun and just because it's good and it's nice doesn't make it educational. And VR headsets have become very much the same thing. People say to us, oh, bring VR headsets because it's cool, but it still doesn't make it good. Now I'll show you a video. I'll show you a video of how we have been using VR, and then I'll talk about some of the lessons that we've learnt from it. The challenge for us has been to make something that's inherently cool and different into something where we can convey learning outcomes. So we've all spent time developing ways of learning. I have a community engagement and learning delivery methodology, and I'm sure some of you have strategies that you use. And within those, we all identify ways that young people learn. And for years in our sector, we've been looking at replicas and artifacts and hands-on learning and kinesthetic learners and looking at ways that we can engage different learners. And I'm really passionate that we don't throw all that away in the 21st century by bunging kids into headsets, because that isn't the way forward, that isn't the future. But that isn't to say that they don't have a really useful place in a learning environment. What we're going to do is I'm going to hopefully show you some of the ways that we've tamed VR to deliver learning environments for us. No, the challenges we faced, aside from technology, have been making it something that young people can get involved with as a group. So the inherent issue with headsets is that it's for one person at a time. So we learned very quickly that when you've got 30 children in a class, you can't have one person in a headset and everyone else not participating. And from a financial perspective, it's not possible to have 30 separate headsets. So what we wanted to do is split this down into a group participatory activity that everyone can join in with. One of the ways we did that was to separate our groups down a bit. So we quite often deliver a 45-minute session. I'm sure most of you do as well, 45-minute or an hour sessions. We broke out some of our learning outcomes into shorter 15-minute sessions so that we can have a carousel of different activities and make one of those activities VR. So that while a third of the class are doing one thing, a third of the class doing something else, a third of the class can be involved in VR, and that's roughly about 10 people. We use hot spotting as a technique, or hot seating. It's one of the oldest techniques in the teaching handbook, as it were. We put one child into the VR headset, and they are our chosen person. And sometimes there's an argument of, well, that's not fair, I wanted to have a go. But first learning outcome, life's not fair. Not everyone can have a go at everything. So we have our one person who's in the environment, and then everyone else can see it on a big screen. The second way we use it is to link it to literacy and to think about open questioning. So we get, initially I would set an example, and we would say to our participant, open questions about what they can see or what they can feel. How do you feel? How is this different to your own home? What do you want to see when you're in this place? And we can turn that around and use it on the audience as well. So we can say to our audience, give me some adjectives that describe the environment you can see in front of you, and bring out, elucidate from them words that help them describe what they can see. So hot seating is good, open questioning is good, adjectives are good. Something that really surprised me the first time I put a child into a VR environment was they said to me, what do I do? And I was completely struck dumb by that, because for me it was obvious what you should do. You should explore, but young people are very used to now having activities curated from them. So what I wanted to get out from VR was the opportunity to enable young people to curate their own experience. But we have to curate the opportunity for them to curate their own experience, because they may not necessarily have the skills to go out there and explore what they can see in front of them. So we did a lot of work enabling young people to encourage them to explore and to make it a world that they can walk around in and roam. And we can encourage that with group activity as well. So we quite often split the group further down and say, take a vote. Where do you want to go in the environment? What do you want to see? And then we can take them to different places, and the person who's hot-seated can transport everyone into different places in the environment. The final lesson we learned was gamification. So a lot of VR environments are gamified. There's very few VR environments that are not game-based or have some sort of playing function. We didn't want to introduce that, because that would set a time limit. It would introduce competitivity, which I didn't really want. But we wanted to have something that could be, again, group participation, something that they could find together. And the best example of this ever is Usborne books, if you've ever read Usborne books, with little, is it still ducks? And they used to hide ducks around the farm and all sorts of places. Where's Wally is another good example of that. Young people love to find things. So we created within the environment things that young people could find. And in the, particularly in our Roman environment, we've used hairs as an example. So they're hair designs, and we can get the whole, it's behind you, it's warm or colder, depending on their age range, to help them find things. I would say the main lesson we've learned with VR is almost to hide it. When we get it out in public with groups, there is such a clamour at the moment around it, and you only have to go to a STEM festival or a Big Bang festival. Not going to work. Okay. You only have to go to a Big Bang festival to see like the number of people demonstrating VR and the clamour it creates. So when we set our events up, we quite often hide the equipment so they don't see it, and we kind of set it up as a transporting you into a historic environment rather than using the phrase VR. So it's been quite a challenging journey. If you want to have a go on it, we're next door stand but one, so you can come and experience it for yourself, and I will try some opening questions on you. Other than that, my colleagues and I are happy to take questions. And sorry we couldn't demo it. Hazards of technology. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Thank you very much, everyone, for all our speakers today. Have we got any questions? We've got a few minutes for questions. Does anybody have a question for anybody? Kate, Emily, Fran, or Sam? Anybody got a question? Come on, don't be shy. Oh, we've got a question down here. I might not be able to hear you.
My question is around about cost and who pays for the school's participation. We're in a very rural area, and that is the biggest barrier to getting schools on site, because everybody has to travel and that costs, and it's only really independent schools who can afford to do it.
Go on.
So for us, I mean, obviously we're a massive urban city, but we still have the transport things. Some schools come to us by public transport. Quite a lot in Leeds share minibuses. So we're quite flexible with our workshop timings on site, which means that if they've got one minibus and they need to do 2 drop-offs for the class, they kind of go in rotation almost, and the minibus driver just has to keep going from the school to the site, to the school, to the site, to the school, to the site, throughout the day. We also we've started helping schools to be able to be a bit more savvy with their fundraising. We know we all do it and get funding. That skill set that we develop writing applications can help schools access tiny pots of money from foundations and trusts that might help get them that. So we kind of have those conversations with them. In terms of the membership with the curriculum planning, I'll hand back over to Emily.
Yeah, so our membership, I think people are often quite surprised by the pricing structures that we have for our membership. So bronze is £550 for the year, silver is £1,550, gold is £2,100. I think when I did something like 80% of our schools on our membership are in some of the highest deprived wards in Leeds. About 70% of them pull from postcodes in the city that are in the 1% most deprived. They're the schools that actually see the value of investing in us the most, because what they get when they invest in our memberships, or the same with our curriculum planning, which we charge kind of an initial package of £450, that's actually going up because we were told by the council we were charging less per hour for some of my time than we charge for our front of house to stay late after the museum's closed. But what we've found, I think, is that it helps us being in a city, but where schools see the value, they find the budget for it. The other thing I would say around things like the membership and the curriculum planning work is they come to us on their trips, but I go to them a lot. And the other thing is that through the membership, we do Zoom. So I'm still booking virtual workshops. We charge for virtual workshops. I'm still having them booked across the country, but I also offer our members free 20-minute Zoom drop-ins, because it doesn't take any of my time other than the 20 minutes or so to actually do those. They're not sessions. I don't have to plan them. I'll grab it, like, here's an object. I'll drop into class. I'll answer questions the kids have, or give the teachers a bit of an idea of what to do with the objects in their box. It doesn't, I arrange it around my workshops. So if I've got a bit of time, I'll do it. If I don't have time, the schools have to kind of wait till I do have time. But it means that, so I can drop into their classroom virtually. And with the curriculum work, I will go out to them. And once that relationship builds, so that I'm going out to them, they're used to seeing me in school, they've got my email, the teachers are like, can we have a quick Zoom to talk about this? Then actually those return visits become naturally part of this bigger thing, because schools will literally say, where shall we go for Vikings? Can you tell me where's a good place to go for the Stone Age? And I'm obviously like, come and see me for the Stone Age. I don't always say come to our museum. Sometimes I say, well, if you're coming to us for Greeks and if you're going to that site for something else, maybe rather than going to the City Museum twice in 3 years for the same year group, why don't you go to York for Vikings? But it's about that relationship. Once that relationship is there, somehow schools always have money to pay for my time, because they know that they get the value out of that money.
Should we just ask Fran the same? Yes. Fran, I just wondered if you've got any kind of perspective on the kind of future of museums and charges in relation to schools. Do you want to just finish up with that point?
Yeah, I think we're obviously a paid-for programme, but we have a 3 bursary scheme programme. So I think that's really important. It's one of the ways that we make sure that we reach all the children that are important to us, or at least the schools that are important to us. I think long-term museums are probably unsustainable without some sort of charging model. And I think there's also, I've always felt quite strongly that learning is as valuable as any other work that we do. And there is an aspect of when we offer everything for free, whether it's valued in the same way, not by the schools always value what we do, but internally, is it valued in the same sort of way? So I think charging models bring with them other benefits internally. But I think one of the things I would recommend if you have not had a chance is maybe think about something like, I know everyone's overworked and I don't want to be adding to people's lives, but being a school governor is a really new perspective. It's something I started about 3 years ago. I don't have kids, so I had no other interaction with like being in that sort of environment. And I have found it eye-opening. You're exactly right. There are school budgets. There's people premium budgets. There's CPD budgets. There's rollover budgets from supply they hadn't used, all sorts of things. And the schools do make decisions on where to prioritise that spend. But I think the hard reality for museums is that we have to make sure that we're in competition with going to the zoo. We're in competition with having, that speaker come in and paying their honorarium. So we have to make sure that what we're offering is valuable enough for them to actually spend what little money they have to paying for that coach or paying our fees. But they will do if what we're offering is worth the money and worth their time. So I think if you can get in either as a school governor or see if you can just build a relationship with a school that gives you the same sort of level of access without the same level of responsibility, and just see if you can understand it's so dull, understand their accounts and their finances, because it is gives you a whole different perspective on actually what schools can afford and where that money could come from.
Great, thank you very much. I think we're probably now out of time, but if you want to come and have a little chat with any of our speakers, we'll stand around for a little while the next talk gets set up. So thanks very much, and thank you, Lemonade Show, for inviting us. It's been great.